afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Gallier, and I am a Health Promotion and Improvement Officer in Dublin North City and County. I'm delighted to welcome you to our first webinar of our October series of webinars, organised in conjunction with HR for your health and well-being. I would like to introduce you to our speakers today. Fiona Foley, who is the National Coordinator of Dementia Understand Together, and Matthew Gibb, who is the Director of Dementia Services Information and Development Centre. This topic was one of the most requested in our staff survey last July. This reflects huge interest in the area, and we were delighted to have Fiona and Matthew with us here today to share their knowledge. If you have any questions for either Fiona or Matthew, just please pop them into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will try and get to them at the end. If you are on social media and you would like to share this afternoon's webinar, you can do so by using the hashtag StaffHealthDNCC. We will also have a survey at the end of the webinar, and by completing, you will be entered into a draw to win some prizes. So I'd like to hand you over now to Matthew, who's going to begin this afternoon's webinar. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks very much for inviting us over today. I'll just get this presentation up. Okay, I hope everybody can see that now. So I'm going to give a brief overview of dementia in the context of Ireland. We'll have a wee look at brain health as well, because I think that's one of the topics you're really interested in. And I'll just point out that brain health for everybody. It's not just for older people. So I'll get underway now. So in Ireland at the moment, there's about 64,000 people living with dementia. I suppose one of the interesting things about that is that at least 60% of those are actually living in the community. I think a lot of us feel sometimes that people with dementia, because they're not, it's a hidden disability, if you like. It's not physically obvious in a lot of people. That a lot of these people must be living in long-term care settings, but that's not actually the case. The vast majority of people with dementia are living in the community. And as you can well imagine, with 64,000 people, there's a huge army of family carers out there supporting those people living in the community. Understand Together, and Fiona, I'm the chair of Understand Together at the moment. Fiona will be talking more about them a little bit later on. But one of the stats that we came out with was that there are at least 500,000 people in Ireland whose families have been affected by dementia. So it's very prevalent, very common, and it's something that very few of us will find it hard to avoid as the years go on, either personally, or in relation to our families. So the cost of dementia care is huge. It really is massive. And it's been worked out that it's higher than stroke, heart disease, and cancer combined, which is quite a staggering and kind of scary statistic, really. The thing that I find hardest to swallow, though, is the actual healthcare spending is much less than in any of these other conditions. In fact, less than all of them combined. So it's something that really needs to be rectified, because this is a big problem that affects, as we've already found out, it affects a lot of people within the country, and it's something that we have to do something about. The actual cost, they reckon, is somewhere in the region of 1.7 billion per annum. I suspect I think that's a slightly low figure, is my own suspicion. The bulk of care is provided by family carers. And again, just harking back to the fact that the majority of people with dementia are living in their own communities. Again, another statistic that's really, again, quite scary or worrying is that the vast majority of that funding, the funding that exists for dementia care in Ireland, is directed towards long-term care settings, which seems a bit perverse, really, when you think about the equation. If we've got 60% of people living in the community, and here we have at least 43% of funding, state funding, actually goes towards long-term care. with only a small amount, 9–10% spent on actual social care. Those kind of figures really need, as we look to the future, those kind of figures need to be turned on their head. So if the current trend continues, this is epidemiologically, so how we can expect the numbers of people with dementia to increase as our population increases and ages at the same time. We reckon, well, the really scary figure is that the dementia, the numbers of people with dementia will double in 20 years and treble in the next 30–35 years. So how as a nation are we supposed to try and deal with that? How are we supposed to find the people to care for those numbers of people? How are we going to find the money to pay for that? So we really need to do something, and this is where the whole idea about brain health comes into play. So we really need to talk about the risk factors for dementia. I'd encourage all of you, if you haven't seen it already, to go and have a look at this report. It's from the Lancet Commission, and the lead investigator was Professor Jill Livingston, and it really is a very, very interesting read. It's not particularly long, but it's got a load of really detailed information in it. And I suppose the good news story coming out of this is that up to 40% of dementia risk factors are modifiable. So if you have a look at this kind of inverted S, if you like, image on the screen, you can see in the grey, the grey side of the diagram, we've got 60% of unknown risk. That's, some of that can be genetic, or or just other factors that we're just not aware of yet. All the stuff on the coloured side of the diagram are things that we can do something about. And it's and Joel's broken this down into early life, midlife, and later life. I would say that we really need to be doing a lot of these things right through life courses. We shouldn't just be looking, or at midlife we need to be doing this, and later life we need to be doing that. I think we need to be looking at our lifestyle factors, through our whole lives, and this is where public health messaging is really key. So if we look there, obviously, if we can get people involved in education and keep them involved in education for as long as possible, and preferably lifelong, then that can have a potentially 7% modifiable. It can reduce the risk of dementia by up to 7%. If you look at midlife, the really interesting one, and this is quite a new stat, is the one around hearing loss. So up to, they reckon, that we could lower the risk of dementia by about 8% just from making sure that people avoid going deaf or becoming having impaired hearing. So this is really these are really interesting statistics that no one's really come across before, and that's only popped up in the last couple of years, that particular one. Others are fairly obvious, and things that we can do about traumatic brain injury is a bit difficult because no one goes looking for traumatic brain injury. These things happen, but the things we can do something about, we can moderate things like alcohol intake, and we can moderate high blood pressure, and we can look at our diets as well. Later in life, Jill's looking at things like smoking, depression, social isolation, which is an important one, physical inactivity. And then other stuff that's a bit kind of macro, like things like air pollution. But these are things that we can actively do something about. And if we can reduce the amount of prevalence of dementia, then we can really make a huge impact on the people who will get dementia later in life. So we need to be, the public health messaging here is we need to be helping people to make healthy life choices. And this is where you guys come into play, and as it says there, delaying the onset of dementia by 5 years would halve the prevalence. So the scary statistics from the previous slide are really important to adhere to. Some new evidence that's popped up recently, that the Mediterranean diet can lead to a 23% lower risk of developing dementia. Now you've got to remember, all of these figures they're based on population studies. They're not based on individuals. So that's not to say that if you suddenly adopt a Mediterranean diet, your risk factor lowers by 23%. It will lower, but probably not by 23%. This is because we're looking at macro level. This is we're looking at population across populations. So, physical exercise, again, a bit of a no-brainer. People need to be sedentary lifestyles are a huge risk for people developing dementia. So we need to get people up and moving, and we can see significant improvements in all sorts of it has all sorts of benefits to how we live our lives. The 10,000 steps one, I keep seeing that figure changing. It keeps going up and down. But it just means, again, avoid sedentary lifestyles, get up and move. So for you, the public health messaging, I suppose the good news is that you don't really have to reinvent the wheel here, because it's the same advice that you're given for stroke, heart disease, and cancers. So you can see the image down the right-hand side of the screen there. So improving our diets, regular exercise, avoiding smoking, keeping our cholesterol within safe levels, blood pressure, blood sugar, so avoiding things like type 2 diabetes, managing stress, lowering our alcohol intake. These are all, this messaging is the same throughout, whether you're giving it for heart disease or stroke or dementia or cancer. So as I said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's not going to be, a big expensive marketing campaign to change your messaging. So just in relation to dementia awareness, and this is look, I'm only touching on this because time is very short. People with dementia, it's not like people with mobility issues where they may be using crutches or wheelchairs. It's not always obvious that somebody has got a dementia. They don't have a big sign, on their head identifying them as somebody with dementia. So what do? We have to look at the kind of problems that might manifest themselves and think, well, that may be a reason why somebody's having difficulty. So again, things like confusion with time and location, those would be fairly common. Memory loss, again, it will depend on the type of dementia that a person is having difficulty with. For example, some people with certain types of dementia might present with communication issues first, as opposed to memory issues. So that really will depend on the subtype of dementia. But in general, because the majority of people with dementia are probably living with conditions more akin to things like Alzheimer's disease, then these are the things that we're seeing. So poor judgment, people having difficulty solving problems, putting things down and not being able to find them again, difficulty completing everyday tasks, and as I said, so maybe some communication issues. What we often see with people with dementia as well is as the symptoms increase, we often see a withdrawal from social activity, and that's detrimental in the long run for people when they become isolated and lonely, and loneliness in itself is a risk factor for dementia. So we don't want that to happen. There's plenty of places you can go for advice from the community and to be signposted in the right direction. The Dementia Advisor Service run by the Alzheimer's Society is grown quite a lot over the last 3 to 4 years, which is great. We've also got memory technology resource rooms, which are in most counties now. I think the nearest one to you guys is in the Ashland Centre on Beaumont Road. They're run by occupational therapists, and they'd be more than happy to give you advice and information. And then, of course, you've got things like Healthy Age Friendly Homes, who work very closely with my colleague Fiona and ourselves in promoting all things healthy for older people. So these are all places you can go for extra information. Online, I suppose the easiest places to go are Understand Together. We've got a great website, alzheimer.ie, where they've also got a lot of resources available there. Dementia Pathways has just opened up again, I believe. I was looking at it this morning. I think it moved from its own individual website into the HSE's website. So Again, it's lots of valuable information on there. Just before I finish, I'll just give you a little bit of overview of who we are. So, as Paul was saying at the beginning, we're the Dementia Services Information and Development Centre. We're based in St James's Hospital, though we are a national body and we absolutely work nationally. We're not confined to James's. The kind of things you'll find on our website that you might find useful. We've got free e-learning. This involves just a very short sign-up sheet. It's really just to help us with our statistics, and so that we can track how well our services are being used and how much value people are getting from them. Because we are state funded, we want to make sure we're giving taxpayers value for money. As I said, these are all free. So there's things like dementia awareness, environmental design, there's communication. For your colleagues in occupational therapy and speech and language therapy, there are very specific e-learning modules set aside for them. And we've also got a number of information booklets. This is just a selection of our latest ones. These are available for you to order from healthpromotion.ie, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. You can, if you're signed up to Health Promotion, I think you can probably order about 20 to 25 copies at a time of these documents, with just restocked with the HSE. So I'm pretty certain all of these booklets are available. But you'd be more than welcome, or you can download them on from the website as PDFs. Absolutely no problem at all. So we also do education and training, and we often go out and train anybody really, but mainly health and social care professionals. Our services are free for HSE staff, and for most publicly funded organisations, we provide them for free. We will charge for like say private nursing homes or and similar organisations, but otherwise we're state funded, and we will provide education to state-funded bodies for free. So that brings my presentation to a conclusion. So thank you very much for listening. I'm going to hand you back to Paul, I think, briefly. And I'll just stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Matthew, and thank you very much, Paul, the two of you, for first of all the introductions and also for the great presentation, Matthew. I think it's really valuable to see all the brain health information and all the resources that are available for everyone to access, and also the free resources. Just briefly to introduce myself now again, I'm Fiona Foley. I'm a Senior Project Manager with the National Dementia Office, and I'll be speaking to you today about a campaign to create inclusive communities for everybody living with dementia. But I think it is really good to start, actually, before I share my slides, just by listening to the person with dementia and about what community actually means to them. So we have a short video for you here of Kevin Quaid sharing his own experience with living with Lewy body dementia.
I'm Kevin Quaid, I'm 55 years of age. I'm a passionate Limerick man, but I'm living in North Cork, and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease just over 3 years ago, and with Lewy body dementia about 2.5 years ago. Pint of my usual. At the moment I am, I suppose, what you call semi-independent, in that I'm living at home and Talina, my wife, is my full-time carer. It means I can live a pretty normal life. Cheers, lads.
Aye. Cheers, buddy.
It's not just living within these four walls. The people in my community involuntarily have become my carers part-time, if you like. I have a great life because I have a balance in my life. And the balance in my life is when I can go into my local Lincoln Turk, sit down, have a drink, be one of the boys, go to the local coffee shop, have a coffee, be just an ordinary customer. I got diagnosed with Lewy body dementia that day. My family were diagnosed with it. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's a lot easier to have it than live with someone who has it. But we as a family have discussed everything from me not knowing who I am, nursing home, funeral, driving, power of attorney, you name it. So when the day comes that I can no longer pretty much do anything for myself, or I can't be left alone, the family know what Dad wants. Helena knows what her husband wants. Do you know what? This is home care at its finest. At its finest. You won't get, when you're capable of doing this, and there's people with dementia in middle stages and even late stages, they can go, listen to that, they can go for a walk, see this, because by God, it means a hell of a lot to me. I don't have to be inside in my cottage. I don't have to be outside in my rose garden. Once I'm in my community, I feel I'm at home. When you're diagnosed and when you're told you have a disease that's progressive and incurable, and you know, even saying it now, it chokes me up. But you can live with it and you can live well.
I'd like to say thank you to Kevin for always allowing us to show this video. I think it shows very clearly how important community is to him, and he'll reiterate that in many talks that he does himself. So I'll go into my presentation now. I'm just going to quickly share my screen here for you, and tell you a little bit about our campaign, the Dementia Understand Together campaign, and why it's so important. You might be familiar with it already. It is a HSE-led campaign, but as you can see with the many logos here at the bottom, it's clearly a partnership campaign, because if we're talking about creating an inclusive community, if we're talking about creating change in our communities, not one organization can do this alone. Not one person can do this alone. We always can do this alone. We always have to do this together. So we work very closely with Matthew and his team, but also with the Alzheimer's Society, with Age Friendly Ireland, Healthy Ireland, Age and Opportunity, and many more. And at the heart of this campaign are people with dementia and their families, because their voice is really directing where we're going, what we're doing, because they know what's important to them and their communities. So Matthew had talked about the 64,000 people currently living with dementia here in Ireland. And I think when you think back to the video now of Kevin himself, behind these numbers, and they are, you know, high numbers, but there's an individual behind this with their own feelings, with their own experiences. And every person who has dementia will be on a different journey. They'll have a different experience, and they might need different types of support as well. We recently conducted a study as part of our work and asked the general public of whether they know somebody with dementia or have known somebody with Alzheimer's disease. And as you can see here, that almost 50% of the population have. So it is something that really affects all of us. It affects the majority, because it might be your neighbor, it might be your friend, your colleague, it might be a family member, it might be yourself. So it is really good and important that we talk about dementia, and that we really continue raising awareness of it in our communities. So what does Dementia Understand Together really is trying to do? It's trying to create an Ireland that embraces and includes people living with dementia, and which displays solidarity with them and their loved ones. And why are we doing this? Because again, research in the past showed that people with dementia were highly isolated. They felt stigmatized. They weren't really part of their community. And that was for different reasons. It might be because people didn't really understand what dementia means. They didn't understand how, people are affected by dementia. But it also was that a person with dementia might be worried about going back out into their community, might be worried about how others might respond to them. And so we really are trying to change that. We're trying to change how we talk about dementia in Ireland. So we're doing that in one way by creating awareness and understanding. So events like today are fabulous because we can talk about dementia to yourselves, and we can answer questions, and we can hopefully create a better understanding of the different types of dementia and how people are affected. But in order to really create change, what we're trying to do as well is that we want to inspire everybody in our community, whether it's yourselves, whether it's the businesses, whether it's other partner organizations like the Men's Sheds or Park Run, to really take meaningful actions to include people in their activities, to include people to continue to go out to a local post office, to a local coffee shop, and be part of a community, just like Kevin is still part of the community. So how do we do that? So we always talk about that we really need a culture change for dementia. Don't know if you think back, many years ago when we talked about cancer, again, people didn't really want to voice that they might have cancer. And then also people wouldn't really understand, what type of cancer do people actually have. And nowadays it's totally different. We are very aware, we're very, open about this. And we're informed about the, how cancer can affect a person. So what we're trying to do with dementia is something very similar, that we really want people to think about, dementia in a different way, that we act very differently towards a person with dementia, that we interact differently with them as well. So when we talk about culture and culture change, again, we asked people with dementia, what does that actually mean to you? So just like Kevin talks about his community, what does it mean to have a culture change in our communities? And this is what people with dementia and their families said, that they want to be understood and respected and valued. Just because they have a diagnosis of dementia doesn't mean that they have changed. They're still a valued member of our communities, and they want to be respected for that. They want to continue to stay socially connected. Sometimes they might need a little bit more support. So the person with dementia might not be able to drive anymore. Or they might feel, they're part of a tennis club, but they can't really count the match or follow the score. So can somebody be there to support them, to go to a venue or to participate in an activity? So that's what they want to do. They also want to make sure that the businesses and amenities can be responsive to them. So when they're going out into a setting, that if for some reason they might feel unsure, or they might feel that they might need a bit of help, that they can ask for that within a business, and that there is somebody who can respond to that. And one thing that we really have to talk about as well when it comes to inclusivity is that built environment, because sometimes we build environments that are wheelchair accessible, and we're really good, and we've really made changes to making our environments age friendly. But are we really aware whether these environments are also accessible for a person with dementia? How is a person with dementia affected by their condition, and how does that impact them when they go out into their environment? So these are the 4 things, and if you look at them, they're no different for a person with dementia than they are for us. So it just means that they might need a little bit more support in order to engage. So what we did then, and again, together with people with dementia, we broke those 4 outcomes down into very concrete actions that you and I can take. That first of all, when we know that a person has dementia, that we don't let dementia define them, that we continue to see the person, that we continue to talk about the different types of dementia and just bring dementia into the forefront, that we stay in touch. So often, it can happen that we shy away because we don't know what to say. We don't know how to engage, and we don't know how the person with dementia is going to react. But we need to stay in touch. If it's one thing that we learned from COVID and social isolation, is that we need that kind of engagement. We need people to be there and to look out for us in any shape or form. So that means we also have to ask, how can we help? what can we do? Is it a lift? Or is it to just go out for a walk? Or is it just to be there for a chat? What is it? How can we help? And it's the same to help a person to stay connected and to ask, what is the hobby that you'd like to do? Do you like going to a gallery? Do you like just going shopping in town? What would you like to do, and where can we support you? So these are the simple actions that we're really promoting everybody to take. So again, coming back to that culture change, I think it's really vital, and also in your role, that we look at, well, what is my role in this culture change? Because we all can influence change. Through our own behaviors, we influence the people who trust us. So if somebody sees you leading out with a positive behavior, right, because you're supporting a person with dementia, or because you're raising awareness for dementia, you're talking about it, people who trust you will follow that behavior. So we really have that power to influence change. And before we know it, this change grows across Ireland. And I always love this image, because I see myself as one of these little dots here. But through our connections, through our networks, through our talks, we spread, the different behaviors and the culture change across all of Ireland. And we all have this power to do that, regardless of where we live, whether it's a small community somewhere or whether it's in the big towns, just such as Dublin. I want to show you a little bit and explain, well, what does actually partner and champion engagement and all of that we're doing as part of the campaign, what does that look like? Because we work with, as I mentioned before, with very many national partners. And if you imagine yourself going into a community, who are these partners? So first of all, you need public transport, possibly to go somewhere, to go into town or to go somewhere. You might go into a pharmacy such as Boots in order to buy something for yourself, or you might engage with the men's sheds because that's the hobby that you'd like to do, or you're an older adult as well and you're interested in all of the activities at Age Friendly Ireland and how they are engaged in their community. So one thing that Matthew and his team, but also the Alzheimer's Society and ourselves do, we provide dementia awareness training. And that is the key, that people and organizations understand a bit more about dementia and that they can engage with people with dementia. And only yesterday, Irish Rail held another one of their many workshops with people with dementia, where they actually just sat down with members of the Irish Dementia Working Group, with staff members from Irish Rail, and they talked about travel and how people could be better supported, or what do they need in order to feel really confident to go out in the community. And Kevin is a really good example here, because Kevin, with his type of dementia, he was very, very worried about taking public transport. He would not go on a train by himself. And 2 or 3 years ago, actually now, we did workshops with Irish Rail and with Kevin and talked about, well, how can staff members support? And Irish Rail have been really fantastic in that Kevin can call staff members before he goes on a journey. He lets them know he's going to be traveling, and he feels really confident coming up to Dublin by himself, because he knows that if he needs something, he can talk to a staff member. So this is what we do with our national partners. And then when we talk about local champions, so again, champions are yourselves, myself. We work with over 650 people who have just contacted the campaign and said, we want to get involved. What can I do in my community? I'm passionate about it. And one of the key things now is that champions should never feel that they're alone, that if you're trying to do something, some change in your social club, or you're a member of a sports club, of a gym, and you're trying to raise awareness, that you don't feel you're doing this alone in your community. So a lot of our communities are actually forming dementia alliances, and they become part of the Age Friendly Alliance, which is really in most of our counties very prevalent out there. So members can join these Age Friendly Alliances, the Dementia Alliances, and look at, well, what is the action I want to do in my community? And some communities start with dementia awareness events or dementia awareness training for local stakeholders. And just next week, I'm traveling down to Bantry. They're holding a second awareness event for their local community, and they're inviting the businesses in who've already participated in training to be part of that and to share their own stories as well. So these are just some of the images of activities that are happening out there. And why do I show images? Because storytelling is really part of what we do. And again, you can play a big role in that, because if you see something positive happening, or if you're doing something in your community that you'd like to share, storytelling is really key to that, because stories communicate our values. They communicate what we're trying to achieve in our community, and they touch people's hearts. So through the stories, you really inspire more people to take actions. And when we think about the brain health messages that Matthew had earlier as well, and you're trying to inspire positive behaviors and behavior change out there, you can do that by storytelling, by letting people share their stories and capturing these stories. And that's what we're trying to do with our campaign as well, that we're trying to do that through our social media, through radio, through local media, and really look at different ways of sharing stories. So if you have stories to share, please also share them with us. So you might spot a badge that I'm wearing here, and this comes into storytelling as well, and to the topic of solidarity and so on. Because of the different activities that are happening out in communities, we talked again to people with dementia and said, well, are you actually aware of all this? Are you aware that Boots is doing this training? Are you aware that your local community, Men's Sheds, is dementia inclusive? And they're not always aware, because again, not all the stories might reach people with dementia or their families. So we have to look at how can we make it visible. So we created this symbol based on a lot of feedback and consultations with the public and with our community champions and partners. And this symbol really says what it's supposed to say, that whoever is wearing the symbol or putting up the symbol in a shop, in a setting, that setting shows their solidarity with people with dementia, that they're part of a Dementia Understand Together inclusive community. So what is our ambition with this symbol? And again, maybe think about how you can help us in putting that symbol out there into our communities, and taking that symbol out when you go and talk to your stakeholders. We really want this to be a sign that communities and businesses and services are working towards becoming dementia inclusive. And we want to increase the visibility and awareness of this campaign through this symbol. So why does that matter? And again, Matthew mentioned that topic of brain health and staying socially engaged, and how important that is for our brain to stay healthy and stay well. Well, social engagement is also, and brain health is also important when you have a diagnosis of dementia, because it can slow down the progression of the condition, and it can really support people's mood and their overall health and well-being. So we really want to make sure that people with dementia can stay socially engaged, can stay part of their community. So this is also an opportunity for people, for us to show that, you know, a museum is inclusive, or a dance club is inclusive, and that people with dementia know that they can be confident to go out there, because if they need support, if they need a bit of help, they can ask for it. So again, this whole campaign is a contribution of people with dementia. These are all people living with dementia, and these are their quotes. And this is what they want to do to stay engaged in their community, whether it's travel, whether it's getting out and about, whether it's doing their hobby, or just having a cup of coffee. So we have, you know, different campaign resources, such as these posters that can be put up just to raise awareness for the symbol. Just like Matthew as well, we do have other resources, and you can find most of them on the Understand Together website. And this includes, you know, window stickers that you can put up, the leaflets, but also real guidance for communities of how can they get involved in this campaign. You're surely familiar with healthpromotion.ie, and all of the resources can be ordered free of charge there as well. So I'm going to finish up here now, but I think just maybe for yourselves as well, to think about, well, how can I get involved within your role, but also as an individual. On our website, you have a chance to sign up as a champion, and there's a real process for champions with an initiation workshop that we talk a little bit more about, what can you do in your community. But I think it's also a really good opportunity for yourself to look at how can you embed dementia and brain health into your current messages, because sometimes, when you're talking about smoking cessation, or when you're talking about the impact of alcohol, people might not be aware that, these are also risk factors for dementia. So we can look at ways of how these can be included in your messaging. And again, storytelling for behavior change. Is there a way for you to capture stories? Can you share them with you? And if there are other resources that would be helpful to you, you can always let us know. And we're really happy to work with you to look at what is helpful for you in your work setting, but also, in your community setting. So thank you very much for that and for your time. And I think if there are questions, Matthew and I are really happy to take them.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Matthew. That was absolutely fantastic. And thank you for putting the time into the presentation, first of all, and sharing it with us. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience did here as well. Just to reiterate what Fiona said, I'd just like to encourage you all, if you have any questions, you can just pop them in the Q&A tab there at the bottom. Matthew, thank you for, I suppose, the kind of figures around dementia in Ireland at the moment, and also for sharing those signposting resources. And they're available, the links are available in the chat box there at the bottom. Fiona, your video of Kevin was absolutely fantastic. Now, I must say it was very, very powerful. And I also enjoyed I suppose, what you shared with us around creating culture of being dementia inclusive across various organizations. We've had a few questions in, so I'm just going to go to the Q&A now and read those out. So the first one is, I think it came in during your presentation, Matthew, so I might direct it to you. And Fiona, if there's anything you'd like to come in with, then you're more than welcome to. Do you feel public health messaging around dementia is sufficient given the projected growth of dementia in coming years? And what would you like to see done in this regard?
Well, no. The simple answer is no. It's not enough on its own, but it is part of the solution, very much part of the solution. I mean, just I think that that inverted S from the image that we put up from Joe Livingston, I think it tells a big story. I mean, being able to reduce the numbers by up to 40%, I think it would make a huge difference, and it would make the difference between something we can actually afford to do something about and not. But no, you're right, it's not the only answer. Medicine and science has got a big role to play as well. The last couple of years, we've seen a big change in, I suppose, in the treatment landscape. Up since about, I don't know, from at least the last 20, 23, 24 years, the only medications available for dementia, the only treatments available for Alzheimer's disease were symptomatic and not hugely effective. Now, though, we've seen just a relative breakthrough in disease-modifying treatments. Now, it's just the very, very start of this new scientific involvement, but it's an important start. And I think it's a door being slowly pushed open, and I'm hoping that doorway is going to get much, much wider in the coming years. But that's going to play. You're going to hear a lot about that over the next 3, 4, 5 years. I'd say that's going to be the next big thing. But what would I like to see? Dementia is because I've been working in this field for so long. You kind of get a bit fed up, maybe, or blasé about people's reactions to people with dementia. And for me, if you're going to live to, we tend to be living longer in our lives now, and dementia is very much a fact of life. I mean, we should be looking at dementia societally almost as a privilege, because our longevity is such now that we're actually, if we only live till 50, for example, then, if that was the average age of death, then dementia wouldn't be an issue. But the fact that our societies are so healthy, so good, our standard of living is so high that people are now living and projected to live, into their hundreds. Dementia is almost a privilege in that regard, But I'd like to see it being normalized a bit more, so that people can get out into the world, as Fiona's presentation was showing there. We need to make sure that people get out and engage and keep engaged in their local community activities and stuff. And we need to minimize the difficulties that people with dementia face and help them to maximize their abilities. That for me is a really important message.
That's great, Matthew. Thank you. Fiona, would you like to come in on that?
No, I think Matthew has covered it absolutely perfectly. And maybe just to say, I do think that, I completely agree that, awareness campaigns and public health messaging itself isn't the answer. But I do think it's really important that we do have that kind of messaging as well, and that we look at how can we reach the general public, and what is their way of gathering information, where do they get information, and also groups that that we might find much more difficult to engage with as well. So we are conducting research into the topic of what is the general awareness of the brain health and the dementia risk factors, and also to find out, well, what are the tools that we can use to reach people and to share these messages as well, that we could create a greater awareness of the things that we can all do to make sure that we keep our brain healthy.
Fantastic. Thanks a million, Fiona. The next one I think is for you as well, Matthew, but again, Fiona, feel welcome to come in if you wish. Beautiful presentation by Matthew Gibb. Please, where and how can I register for the dementia courses on e-learning, and are they free?
Yeah, it's very simple. If you go to www.dementia.ie, and you can just click the tab that says education, and then online education. They're all free. As I said, there's just a very brief sign up. We'll delete your details if you don't want to keep them, obviously GDPR and all that. But otherwise, they're completely free to access. You can use them anytime you wish. As I said, generally for state-funded bodies, there's no charge for any of our services.
That's great, Matthew. They're great resources to have, and thank you for providing them.
I will also understandtogether.ie though, because it's a great website, lots of information on there. And as our education pieces aren't the only game in town, there's other organisations even providing very, very good resources. Our colleagues in the Alzheimer's Society, our colleagues in Engaging Dementia. There's for healthcare attendants, for example, and healthcare staff, there's a really good dementia elevator program that's provided free of charge, and that can be accessed through National Dementia Office, I believe.
That's great, and I think Lauren has kindly popped those links up in the chat there. So for any of the audience who's further interest, you can just click on those links below.
And maybe just to add that if questions come when you are engaging, with different stakeholders, on the Understand Together campaign website, there is also, as Matthew mentioned, the elevator training, but it's geared towards specific groups as well. So it could be to businesses, financial services, or transport providers. So depending on who you're linking in with and who might have a question, they could be of interest as well. And they're all for free.
That's great. The next comment that came in, Fiona, I think came in just after your video. So I'll just read that out. That it took my breath away. It's easier to live with it than to live with the person who has it. So I think that was a quote from Kevin during the video. So that's something I'm sure many of us will take away from today's webinar. And the next question then is just in relation to your own presentation, Fiona. And it is, how can the residents with dementia living in long-term care receive community as compared to people with dementia living in the community?
Yeah, I think, that's not an easy answer because, people who are in long-term care, they might have very different experiences depending on what kind of care setting they are in. But to me, like the key is always when you're caring for a person with dementia, that you see them as the individual who they are and the needs that they have. Sometimes in a more residential care setting, that can be difficult. But I do think it should always be the goal that we look at, what are the things that the person with dementia enjoys, what are the things that are meaningful to them. And there are a lot of different activities that you can still do within a residential care setting, whether it's going out into nature, and we all know how important nature is, that you're out in the environment, but also the different activities, whether you might have, music or arts or physical activities, that continues, but it has to be person-centered, that it really does make a difference to the person, and that they really enjoy what they're doing. So it's not a simple solution, but it doesn't mean that because you're in residential care that you can't come out into a community and enjoy community activities. You might need help, you might need a befriender, you might need a carer, a family member, but it's still possible. And I do think it's really valuable to consider that and how you can do that and in the best way. But maybe Matthew has another tip there too.
Well, I'd say that that nursing homes and long-term care settings, they're part of the community construct. So I think also that they're very aware, they're very knowledgeable these days about dementia and about the kind of messaging that we've been putting out today. So I think they're very conscious about trying to keep people connected to their communities as best they can. Now, I'm sure there's some homes are better than others, but I think that there's ways of doing it as well. But there's also ways of bringing the community to nursing homes as well. I mean, Understand Together does a lot of work around, say, working with library staff, for example. And one of the things that we promote for that is suggesting to libraries that they invite nursing homes into the libraries themselves for specific sessions, or that the mobile libraries, and I know the mobile libraries do go out to nursing homes as well, and bring services to them. So there are ways of bringing, I suppose, increasing those connections between community and nursing homes. And I think nursing homes are very aware of this, and I think that they're definitely improving in that way.
Great. And just to follow on from that, I suppose a question to both of you. I'm sure you're maybe familiar with the dementia villages, or the dementia village that they have in the Netherlands, which I suppose tries to bring that community feel to a kind of a nursing home or a care setting. Do you think that maybe in the future in Ireland that there might be space for such a model of that particular model of care?
Well, that's a contentious issue. I don't know what Fiona's views are on that, and I know what mine are. Look, I think the one that everybody talks about in the Netherlands is a very specific model. Look, at the end of the day, I know I'm always one of Helen Rochford Brennan, I suppose, is a big champion for people living with dementia in Ireland. Has always said that she already lives in the village. She has her own dementia village, and that's the village that she lives in her own community. I'd be a big proponent of keeping people in their communities for as long as humanly possible. That slide that I threw up earlier, where we're looking, where you can see that a good chunk of people, 40% of people with dementia, are living in long-term care settings. I want to see that figure come down. I want to see more and more people with dementia living in their own communities. The reasons why most people end up going into long-term care settings tend to be things that we can do something about. They're either because people are struggling to cope themselves, and if people receive the adequate support, from state or from wherever to help them remain in their own communities, then we wouldn't need that number of people going into long-term care. So look, that's my own personal view. I know other people have different viewpoints, so all views are my own.
And I think maybe perhaps Kevin's video just kind of highlights that as well, Matthew, about the importance of staying in your own community and the impact it has had on his life as well. Just moving on now to the next question, and again, this could be for you both. What's the best emotional support available for carers?
Do you want to begin, Matthew?
I think the peer support, I think, is hugely important. And getting the right information at the right time, I think, makes a huge difference to carers. Now, I'm a social worker by trade. I've worked in the memory clinic here in St James's for many years, as well as for dementia services. So I've worked with a lot of carers in my time. Getting the right information at the right time is hugely important. Getting accurate information. But connecting carers to other family carers in their locale is hugely important as well. The information sharing is very, very valuable and advantageous for them all. So you have other things to add, Fiona. I don't want to step on your toes in relation to that, because I think things like Understand Together do a huge service for people with family members particularly.
Yeah, I think that I completely agree with you, Matthew. I think there are two things. One is also that people who are caring for a person with dementia, that they are aware that they're not alone. So whether that's the community support or whether it's the peer-to-peer support that Matthew said, and we've heard it often from carers saying that it's made a huge difference that they've been able to share their experiences with other carers, that they just get that kind of peer-to-peer support. I think that's really valuable. Another thing that maybe to point out as well, which has been really powerful for people with dementia and also for carers, is the participation in the Irish Dementia Working Group and also the Dementia Carers Campaign Network. And these are the groups, the national groups, where Kevin, for example, is the chair of the Irish Dementia Working Group, where people with dementia can find a way to share their voice on a national basis. And the same for carers, where they have the support, but they can also share their voice and their experiences on a national level. And I think that has been very empowering for people, and it's been really impactful for others out in the community when they hear the experiences from people with dementia and from family carers. So I really do think that talking about dementia and being part of a network, a peer-to-peer network, is really vital for anybody who's affected by dementia.
Definitely, yeah. I suppose it's really important to look after the people with dementia, but also just be very, very mindful of the people that are looking after them in terms of carers, maybe whether that be family or otherwise. The last question we had then was it was actually submitted before today's presentation, but I think you may have answered it, and the first question was quite similar, Matthew, but I'll just read this out. Given our increasing age demographics, are we investing enough in actions and support prevention of dementia and promotion of brain health? But I think you would have touched. Now, if there's anything you'd like to add further, but I think you've touched on a lot of that.
No, I think no, we're not really. We're not. We need to invest more right across the dementia spectrum. Be that in promoting, as we said, good health, on a lifelong level, right through to end of life. We need to invest. It's been a poor relation for a long time in the health sphere, and it's slowly changing. Certainly I've seen things change quite dramatically over the last 20 years, but we need to do more, and there needs to be more investment, quite frankly.
To borrow an old slogan, Matthew, it's a lot done, but a lot more to do. And we just had a few comments then, just thanking you both here for all the information and for the presentation. And I'd like to echo that as well, again, just by thanking you both for your fantastic presentation and also the great discussion after. So Matthew and Fiona, thank you very much. And thank you to the attendees as well for taking time out of your day to join us. We hope that you found this webinar beneficial. And I'd just like to remind you all that our next staff health and wellbeing event for this month is a face-to-face menopause event tomorrow in Undraped in Blanchardstown in Dublin 15. And our next webinar will be next Wednesday, on the 11th of October from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. And that webinar is titled Thriving in the Workplace, and it's with Dr. Porrick Dunn of the RCSA. So there'll be a QR code here at the end, and you can just scan that to sign up. And a gentle reminder as well that our survey, which will pop up now at the end of the webinar, and if you complete that, you'll be entered into a draw to win some prizes. So you never know your luck on this Wednesday. If you just, again, we'd be very, very appreciative of any feedback that you have. Again, thanks for your time, and we'll see you next Wednesday online for our webinar with Porrick Dunn. Thank you.
Thank you.